All right, everyone. Welcome. It's wonderful to see so many people attending today. I'm introducing this webinar series section, Ripples of Connection, a fall webinar presentation series that is a project of the Respectful Terminology Platform Project, which is a project of NICAL, the National Indigenous Knowledge and Language Alliance. And I want to acknowledge the support of our funder, the Mellon Foundation, as well as our institutional partnerships as well. So that's Dalhousie University and the University of the Fraser Valley. And welcome to today's session on community building through international collaboration on multilingual linked open data vocabulary, nomenclature for museum cataloging. And I'm going to pass it over to my co-host and collaborator and all wonderful things, Camille Collison.
Thank you so much, Madhu. I just wanted to welcome everyone here today. As Stacey just said, that I'm Camille Collison. I'm a member of the Tahltan Nation, and I'm also at the University of Fraser Valley as university librarian. I really wanted to take a minute today to acknowledge that I'm currently located on Solo Tumuk, and that most of us joining us today are located on ancestral and often unceded traditional territories here in both the country now known as Canada and the continent now known as North America, and from wherever you join around the world. So really paying attention to the people whose land and whose lands you're on and to their culture, and just honoring them is really important as we move through this work that we're doing. Is really about that relationship and connection with Indigenous peoples and communities. So I encourage all of you to create those relationships that are meaningful and reciprocal and respectful in nature. I also wanted to acknowledge today the life of a legendary figure here in the country we now know as Canada. As many of you may have heard, former Senator Murray Sinclair, who was Anishinaabe and from St. Peter's Band. And I think that that's really important that we talk about. He was a member of Peguis First Nation and also our Chief Commissioner for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that he has walked on this morning, and that we want to give our condolences and honor his memory. So I just ask that we would all take a moment of reflection to think about the work that he's done and how he has really changed the way that we think about our colonial legacy and how we need to move forward, and that reconciliation is not a one and done thing, but we are moving along that path towards reconciliation. So, and in his words, it's not a one-day affair. So if we could just take a moment to reflect on that. So I also wanted to acknowledge that there is a sacred fire already lit outside of the Manitoba Legislative Building, and that if you are in that area, you're welcome to go and give an offering or say a prayer for best wishes for the family. The family is asking that that no other fires be lit across the country out of respect for his journey. And I also wanted to put into the chat where they've asked for any donations in lieu of flowers or other memorials that you wanted to do. And so here is the link to be able to do that. We've really lost a giant and a superhero here in Canada for Indigenous people. And a lot of this work that we're doing today is influenced and shaped by him and his place in both truth and reconciliation and in some of the influence that he's also had in many lives, including my own. So I just want to, with that, introduce the people who are going to talk about some of the changes that we're going to do moving forward. The first person that I'd like to introduce is Nathalie Guénette. I don't know if I said that right. She obtained her diploma in museology techniques from Montgomery College in Laval in 1997 and worked in this Cinématique Québécois, where she documented and digitized photos, posters and archival records. In 1999, she joined the Canadian Museum of Civilization, now the Canadian Museum of History, where she's held various positions in photographic archives and documentation of objects. There, she developed her expertise in cataloging and in developing documentary standards. So she joined the Canadian Heritage Information Network, that we know as CHIN, in 2017. And previously, she was responsible for the French translation of the Spectrum 5.0 standard. She's also the chair for the Canadian for Nomenclature and senior editor of the Nomenclature for Museum Cataloging Standards. So welcome, Nathalie. And then I would also like to introduce Trang, who holds a bachelor's in applied finance from Macquarie University in Australia, and an MLAS from the University of British Columbia. Before joining CHIN, she was an intern at the Department of Collections and Content Management Systems for the J. Paul Getty Trust. During this time, she developed a keen interest in information architecture and data management in the cultural heritage sector. Since she joined CHIN in 2020, her work has mainly been focused on the documentation, technology, and implementation of a semantic model for cultural heritage data. So welcome, both of you. And I'm just going to turn that over to you today.
Thank you, Bill. I'm gonna share my screen. All right. I will start. So, hello everyone. I'm Nathalie Guénette. I'm a French Canadian. My ancestors came to Turtle Island as settlers at the time of New France. I'm a white woman with short hair, wearing blue glasses, and I'm wearing a burgundy sweater today. Today we will be sharing our experience with nomenclature, how it's developed and supported through community involvement and partnerships, and how we use link open data to provide access to this multilingual terminology. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that I'm currently living and working on the beautiful unceded traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Ottawa. Trang, I'll pass it over to you if you want to.
Yes, thanks, Nathalie. And I introduce I'm Trang, and I came from Vietnam. I'm currently living and working in Vancouver, which is situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Spanish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation.
Thank you. So this is our presentation today. I'll begin by giving a brief introduction to nomenclature, including an overview of the LOD features. I'll also describe the governance of nomenclature and how it is developed in collaboration with the community that it serves. Trang will talk about the technical challenges and solution that CHIN has seen while supporting multiple languages and script, designing for accessibility, integrating nomenclature with museum collection management software, and leveraging the power of link open data. So before I start, we want to acknowledge that the use of the word objects or artifact is not correct terms to use when referring to ancestors and belonging of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit origin. I'm sorry, you will hear the word object or artifacts during this presentation. So nomenclature for museum cataloging is a vocabulary and classification system for object names used by historic sites, museum, and local history societies. Cataloging historical and ethnological collection. It contains more than 15,000 concepts arranged in a simple hierarchy, grouped primarily by functional context. It is fully bilingual English and French, and also includes Spanish and some Inuktitut terms. Canadian English and Canadian French variants are included where warranted. Nomenclature is used across Canada and the US and also internationally, and has been incorporated within most collections management systems used by museums. It was first published in 1978, and since its online publication, it is continuously developed and maintained through a partnership between the American Association for State and Local History, CHIN, and Parks Canada. So a few words about nomenclature has evolved in recent years. So although it was originally available only in English, it has been fully bilingual since the first online version was published in 2018. In 2020, it was first published as link open data under a Creative Commons attribution license. So whereas before 2020, users could only search and browse nomenclature, online. In 2020, users could begin to download Excel files or RDF files in various serialization, which are LOD formats. In 2022, we developed a more enhanced semantic model, and in 2023, we've launched a Sparkle endpoint and some other linked data feature to enable easier integration with museum system. And earlier this year, we've published an API. So just to provide some context, I'd like to explain a bit about the importance of standardized object naming and classification to the museum field, and the benefits of using controlled vocabularies like nomenclature. Classification systems and controlled vocabulary facilitate the ability to search, use, and share museum collection data. This is important for all museums' function. Nomenclature provides concise and consistent names for objects, allowing easier data entry and more efficient retrieval. When we can standardize the terminology and know all the alternative terms that could be used to describe an object, searching a collection becomes much more efficient. So nomenclature also provides a classification structure that groups like objects together by their function. This hierarchical arrangement of object terms is designed to help catalogers quickly and accurately find the best term, either a very specific term or a more general for their needs. And in addition to facilitate the work of catalogers, it also helps with data retrieval. Nomenclature can be also used for museum data cleanup and enhancement, which Trang will be talking about later. Again, I want to acknowledge that nomenclature represents one classification system that has been developed and is used by museums who are often considered colonial institutions. However, a community could also use nomenclature terminology, but classifying it according to their own worldview. And we'll refer to it in a later slide. So now a few words about the governance and the committee involvement. Nomenclature is continually developed and maintained by two committees that are made up of volunteer members. There's the Nomenclature Committee, which is coordinated by the American Association for State and Local History. It has members from museums across Canada and the USA, and is responsible for approving new concepts and terms submitted by museums in English. Then there's the Canadian Nomenclature Committee, which is coordinated by CHIN. and has members from museums across Canada, and ensures that French terminology is included for each concept. We ensure also that the Canadian regional terms are added and that the needs of Canadian museums are met. We also have support from professional terminologists within the Government of Canada Translation Bureau. There are also multiple subcommittees operating, which are assigned specific areas to focus on for terminology development. Usually these subcommittees are formed when the Nomenclature Committee identifies an area of the hierarchy that needs focused attention. Could be subject expert in a particular type of object, for example, shoes or watercraft, will sometimes be invited to contribute to the development of terminology in their field. And a very important point here is that terminology is continuously submitted by museum and individual from across Turtle Island and beyond. There are online forms that people can submit terms or request changes. And museums also sometimes submit batches of terms after having reconciled their data with nomenclature. They submit terms that they need, but that they were not found in nomenclature. So since it was first published in 1978 and throughout all the iterations since, nomenclature has been improved and expanded by inviting input from the museum community it serves. So now I'll explain a bit about nomenclature as a multilingual resource, and it contains several languages and language variants. So as I mentioned, nomenclature has been maintained as a fully bilingual resource since 2018. Chins and Parks Canada have been involved in nomenclature's development for many years, but in 2018, for the first time, we began to include Canadian Regional English and French terminology within nomenclature. If you're looking more closely at the concept page, in this case, body armor, you can see here that I've selected the Canadian variant, which display the U for armor, while the American don't put the U. So co-referencing is one of the ways that we are leveraging the power of link open data by including other languages in nomenclature. In 2019, the Getty Vocabulary Program undertook a project to co-reference nomenclature and their Art and Architecture Thesaurus, or AAT. And Wikidata volunteers are continually working on matching nomenclature with Wikidata using the mix and match tool, where nomenclature concepts match AAT or Wikidata concepts. Links are being established both ways. Any changes or addition to these matches are made in the AAT by the editors and in Wikidata by the volunteers. And nomenclature runs a script nightly to refresh and update the references in nomenclature. Here you can see the other references we have for this concept in other LOD vocabulary, China cabinet. There are other links with there's also, here we only have the links with the AAT and Wikidata, but there's other concepts that have links with other vocabulary sources, such as the Library of Congress subject heading and others. This is helpful as a reference to catalogers using nomenclature as an easy way to access the same concept in other vocabularies. And as a result of the co-referencing between the AAT and nomenclature, all of the 15 French terms from nomenclature were made available within the AAT. And wherever there's a match between AAT and nomenclature concept and a Spanish term exists within the AAT, the nomenclature user will see the Spanish term. As seen in the circle area here. So nomenclature currently displays 5,700 Spanish terms from the AAT. Whoops. So nomenclature is striving to be ever more diverse, multilingual, accessible, and inclusive. In addition to being fully bilingual as an agency of the Government of Canada, it is also mandated that the resources we publish comply with the Web Content Accessibility Guideline Standards, or WCAG, so that they are accessible as accessible as possible for people with disabilities. For example, all content in the Nomenclature website has language tags so that automated screen readers can read the content in multiple languages with the correct pronunciation for the visually impaired. As I mentioned, we include Canadian English and Canadian French variants of terms, and this can be both differences in spelling or differences in terminology. I already mentioned the Spanish from the AAT, and we hope that there's also interest amongst North American Indigenous language communities to see terminology from their languages and concepts from their culture represented within nomenclature. We have begun work with the government of Nunavut to include Inuktitut terms and concept, as you can see in the right-hand panel, with the inclusion of Latin script and syllabics. So aside from English and French, technically we can include any language and any script that has an ISO tag. For example, we include Inuktitut terms for the harpoon concepts in both the syllabic script and in the Latin script. And aside from the technical capability to include other languages, there's the question of responsibility and governance for other languages. The Nomenclature Committee and Canadian Nomenclature Committee are only responsible for English and French. And according to our terms of references for the committees, the additional languages may be considered when a community of users has approached the Nomenclature Committee to request addition of terms in a specific language. And the language community will make a commitment to support and develop the terminology in that language. In other words, the Nomenclature Committee will not solicit or review terms in other languages, but will trust the language community to manage their own language. Other language communities can work at their own pace. Only the English and French is mandatory in nomenclature for the website. And also only English and French are offered as options for the website user interface. But other languages are searchable and display in the concept record when they exist. So there's two main ways that other languages can be included in nomenclature. The first one that is what I just described, where a language community takes responsibility for their own terms and adds them directly into nomenclature. They would form a committee to maintain and develop the vocabulary in that language. The second way is for the language community to create or adapt a terminology, a resource in their own language, and then we can include those terms within nomenclature in a couple of different ways. One, if the language community publishes their terminology as link open data, we can add co-references wherever there's a match for mutual enrichment, like our collaboration with the AAT. If the language community doesn't publish as link open data, but just as an ID for each concept, we could still match their vocabulary with nomenclature and include terms in their language within nomenclature. So in all of these scenarios, the language community is cited as the contributor of the terms in nomenclature. So as you've seen, nomenclature is built upon partnerships and community collaboration. These are the ones that Chen has formed to help support nomenclature. And I've already described the first five ones in the bullets, but we're also partnering with the Répertoire des Vedettes Matières, or RVM. It's a thesauri of Laval University in Quebec City, and it's used by Canadian libraries for indexing in French. So they are collaborating with us on the French translation of the GraphDB user interface, and also working with us to co-reference nomenclature and RVM concepts for mutual enrichment. There's Ben Frat, which is a Belgium initiative to add French terminology into the AAT. We're working with NICLA, so we're very happy with this partnership. GraphDB, Chen has contributed the French interface for the GraphDB workbench. Pool Party is a vocabulary management by semantic web company. So Chen has contributed to the development of this tool. And there's collections management software vendors. This is not a formal partnership, but more collaboration. We provide the nomenclature dataset, and we rely on software vendors to disseminate the nomenclature vocabulary to their museum clients. So we also had involvement from software vendors in testing nomenclature's link open data features as they were developed. So all this to say that partnerships and collaboration are key to support multilingual vocabularies published as link open data. So I will presentation over to Trang.
All right. Thank you so much, Nathalie. So for my turn, I will be talking a bit about the technical challenges and solutions that Trang has faced in modernizing nomenclature, how we have designed nomenclature to be easy to implement using linked open data, how we added support for multiple languages and scripts, designed it for accessibility, and how we support museums in integrating nomenclature with the museum collections management software. So for most users of nomenclature, what you see on the public website is all you need to know to use nomenclature. But for museums or software companies that would like to incorporate nomenclature within their systems, for example, to populate their term list for data entry or search assistance, the features that I will show you next will be important. As mentioned in 2023, Chen launched a SPARQL endpoint, semantic resource view, full data sets, and per entity RDF downloads, and content negotiation. And an API is also now available. So these are technical solutions that support ease of access for museums by enabling the terminology to be integrated within museum software to be used as lookup lists for data cleanup and reconciliation, and for search assistance. So this screenshot shows the integration section on the nomenclature website. This is where you would find everything you need to integrate nomenclature vocabulary within your collections management system, including a downloadable files in CSV and linked data formats of the entire dataset, the SPARQL endpoints, the full semantic model documentation, information about reconciling your museum's data with nomenclature using the reconciliation services, and lastly, the API to facilitate the integration of what we think most commonly used functions without needing to understand deeply the semantic data model. So the linked data features would allow developers and systems to have a direct interaction with the database, making it easier for nomenclature to be implemented into museum collections management software and other applications. Our goal is to make the vocabulary as widely and as easily used as possible to help museums standardize their collections documentation and make the collections data more accessible, reusable, and shareable. There are a few ways that nomenclature web services can be used. So collections management software vendors and museums have expressed interest in having nomenclature as a web service to be integrated directly into their applications. So they can use it as a term lookup for data entry, and from selected terms, they can retrieve more information, such as definitions, alternative terms, terms in other languages, and so on. And they're also very useful for any batch operation. Other control vocabularies and knowledge bases, as described previously by Nathalie, like AET and Wikidata, can also use nomenclature web services to look up and add matching nomenclature concepts into their databases, to automatically retrieve and extract more data from nomenclature to enrich their datasets. And by having nomenclature concepts allied to these used vocabularies, it would increase its discoverability, usage, and integration in other knowledge bases. Lastly, data cleaning applications such as OpenRefine can also use the web service, and I will show this on the next slide. So these screenshots are illustrating how the data cleaning tool called OpenRevi can utilize the nomenclature reconciliation web service to match the museum's data values with nomenclature concepts to ensure clean and consistent data. So several terms will be suggested and you can select the most appropriate one. If you're not sure, you can move your mouse over the candidate concept and a pop-up window will show up and give you more information. For example, their direct parents term, any definition if available in both English and French. And also image if it is available. Once that reconciliation is complete, museums can extract and enrich their data sets automatically by pulling in data from nomenclature using the concept ID as the access point. So as you can see in the bottom image, additional columns were added to add the English and French preferred terms. So most commercial collections management systems have included some version of nomenclature to assist with and control data entry and to enhance search. These are just a few screenshots from nomenclature implementations in various museum software. Next, I want to talk about some of the challenges we have faced in developing and supporting nomenclature as linked open data vocabulary. So for managing the nomenclature vocabulary, we use a software as a service called Pool Party by Semantic Web Company. So the data model is based on the Simple Knowledge Organization System, or SKOS. The SKOS is the flat data model, so meaning that it can only describe a single thing, a concept. It's perfect for managing basic data about the concepts in the vocabulary, like labels and relations. And it is great for vocabulary editors who don't usually have a lot of technical expertise. But this simplicity for editors has its own downsides for a complete representation of the data. With simple SKOS, we can't adequately manage data about non-vocabulary concepts, such as information about the images, the contributors and sources of terms and definitions, and the labels for concepts. As such, it was not adequate for the standardized semantic publication of the vocabulary. So to solve these issues, we added some custom elements within our editorial system Pool Party to enable management of contextual information about terms and images, such as views for the grammatical gender for the French preferred label, for example. So, but while Pool Party allows the creation of any number of custom elements to handle contextual data, they are not standardized, therefore posing a challenge for interoperability and integration. So to solve that issue, we added another graph database called GraphDB as a publication repository to handle a complex standardized data structure beyond SKOS. We use some sort of script, ETL script, to do a transformation from our simple editorial model in Pool Party, as part of which is shown to the left image of the slide here to a more standardized complex semantic model in GraphDB, as shown on the right, for data enhancement and publication. So the complex semantic model reuses existing data models such as Dublin Core, Schema.org, Friends of a Friends as much as possible. And here you can see some of the standards that we use in our data model. We also had some challenges with language tags. In discussions with the government of Nunavut about the inclusion of terms in Inuktitut, we saw that the SKOS requirement for a single preferred label per language was potentially problematic for them. The ISO language codes, which are used to represent languages in linked data resources, only have the macro language Inuktitut and two sub-languages, Eastern Canadian Inuktitut and Western Canadian Inuktitut. The government of Nunavut noted that even within the Western Canadian Inuktitut sub-language, there are many different dialects. One language community speaking Western Canadian Inuktitut might prefer one term over another, but with SKOS, only one can be the preferred label and the others are assigned as alternative, which implies an inherent preference by the vocabulary publisher. This may be an indication that further regional division within the language codes may be necessary. We also are required to use language tags to make nomenclature accessible. Screen readers require all content to have proper language tags so that they can properly pronounce words in any language. For the vocabulary content, the terms are already tagged by language, but we must ensure that all elements of the user interface for the nomenclature website, our GraphDB workbench, the SPARQL endpoint are also tagged by language. This is a challenge, particularly for content such as bibliographies and SPARQL queries. And related to this is the handling of language tags in vocabulary management systems. If you are planning to manage multilingual vocabularies, carefully assess the capabilities of the system to handle ISO language tags. Most systems will manage the basic language tags, but also consider handling of region codes that are part of the language tags. For example, this is what allows us to identify a term as Canadian English or Canadian French. These region tags are sometimes not standardized in the vocabulary management systems. Another one is the handling of the script tags. For example, this is how we manage the land scripts for Indigenous languages. Out of the box, some vocabulary management software can only handle the default Lubbock script. And customization to add more languages as needed. Our vocabulary management system came out of the box ready to manage a very long list of world languages, but we had to customize it to manage Indigenous North American languages, although we were not at the moment using all of them. We added the most commonly spoken Indigenous languages in the USA, Canada, and Mexico. We also made a small change to one of nomenclature's oldest conventions. Because of a nomenclature convention that exists from its beginning in 1978, the other terms besides the preferred term for a concept were called non-preferred terms, since the idea from the very early on in nomenclature's development was to encourage museums to choose a single standardized term, the preferred term, for cataloging. Non-preferred terms were only meant to point people to the preferred terms for a concept. But we felt that labeling certain terms, which may be the preferred term in a given language community, as non-preferred was problematic. After discussion with the government of Inuit, we changed from non-preferred to alternative term to be more respectful of and ensure access to the different dialects and regional terms used by diverse communities within one ISO language subtag. And one more change that I want to mention, although you will not see it in this or any record on the nomenclature website, we are using the Scots property hidden label for offensive or disrespectful terms. So by using hidden label, the concepts in its preferred and alternative terms are still found in a search for the offensive term, but the offensive term itself is not displayed. So with any project, there are resource limitations, but I want to address here some specific challenges and solutions for vocabulary management. There are a lot of different vocabulary management systems available, from software as a service to open source solutions. Turnkey solutions can be expensive, and they may not include all the functionality you need for your project. On the other hand, open source software will require a variety of specialized expertise, some server capacity, and other infrastructure. Potential solutions could include using the tools from one project to get a better value for your investment, or to create partnerships with other organizations which are also involved in vocabulary management. Partnerships can involve not just financial resources, but also sharing of data and expertise, and sometimes technical infrastructure. Some of the future potential solutions. The first point is about co-modeling. In the future, we would like to see the communities that use nomenclature involved in the data modeling itself, and not only in the content revision or enhancement process. Second point is about flexibility. In many cases, we can In many cases, when we work on decolonization or more inclusive vocabularies, we focus on the terms, but the model is never questioned. It would be interesting to assess the nomenclature data model according to different worldviews, or to develop a flexible model to allow concepts to be arranged based on multiple worldviews. The third point is about Sidoc theorem. For those that are not familiar with Sidoc theorem, it is the conceptual reference model developed by the International Council of Museums ICOM Documentation Committee. It provides an extensible semantic framework for concepts and information in cultural heritage and museum documentation. The Guénette vocabulary program recently adopted Sidoc theorem as its unifying data model. For example, in its vocabularies such as the AAT, if nomenclature could reuse the similar structure based on Sidoc theorem, it will allow someone used to current Guénette data to easily access the nomenclature data. And as Nathalie mentioned, some crowdsourced matching work is already being done through the Wikidata Mix and Match tool. And term submissions are also crowdsourced from the museum community in a way, but there may be other opportunities here. And of course, we would be interested in working with any language communities, particularly Indigenous communities, to add terms in their languages and concepts from their cultures. So we hope that this presentation has given you a good overview of nomenclature and its benefits to museums, how it is developed and governed, and some perspectives on how working with language communities can support museum efforts toward diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. We are continually working to promote the use of nomenclature, find new collaborators to add other languages, and to find ways to ease the integration of the vocabulary in the museum content measurement tools to increase the discoverability of museum collections. We also continue to create links with other vocabularies to increase discoverability and use of cultural data. The creation of meaning through the harmonization of diverse vocabulary is an important component of that work. That's it, and thanks so much for your opportunity. Here's the contact information for Nathalie and myself. Please feel free to contact us at any time. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Trang and Nathalie, for your presentation. It's really fascinating. I just want to say, Madhu, thank you so much for being here today. And I just think it's really wonderful to see this work as it develops and to understand more about it, because I think that's like a really good introduction to the work of nomenclature and all of the heavy lifting you've been doing there. So we do have one question from the attendees, and so I'll just read it out to you, and maybe you can look in the questions and answers as well. But they're curious about which platform museums typically use for cataloging. Do any of them have, for example, a plugin for the nomenclature vocabulary, so that the nomenclature linked data terms can be searched or added directly from the cataloging client? And are you working with vendors to create these plugins? So I think that's a pretty multi-layered question, but I wasn't sure which one of you wanted to take a stab.
The types of software that exist, and Trang, I will let you continue answer about the more technical, how it's integrated. But in the museal world, we call them CMS, Collections Management System. And there are different types of collection management software that exist on the market. There are some Canadian companies, there are some American, international companies. Axial is one of them. Past Perfect, it's another one. There's some open source ones that exist, like Collection Access, Collection, I'm missing one, I forget. But there's many products now that exist. And the ones I mentioned, I'm not trying to sell one more than another one. It's just some that exist. And usually how they integrate nomenclature, they can is well, Trang, what I don't let you answer that part of the question.
Yeah, so different system would have different ways to integrate nomenclature into the application. So we try to provide different way of access to the database as much as possible. As I mentioned, they can download the entire data sets and store it in the system, or then can do a live API call into our API services. And if they don't use API, if they more prefer Sparkle endpoints, they can use Sparkle queries to get the data. That is not nice to say that I think we will soon might publish a list of software CMS vendors that in some way or another that implemented nomenclature into the applications in the upcoming months as well. That would be of interest. I hope that answers your question, Lisa.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll take the next question here. And so do feel free, everyone, to include the questions in the Q&A for the speakers if you would like. So this question states, I am wondering if nomenclature is used outside of museums, particularly in special collections of libraries.
That is we don't know. We do have a section, because it's, as we explained, it's a functional hierarchy. We do have a category that it's communication objects, and one of them it's documentary objects. And of them, you have lots of archival objects or documents or different books. And it's especially useful for historical museum of society that have a museum collection, but they can also have like a rare collection, for example, on some archival collection. But we don't know. Do you, Trang?
I think we can't really track the usage specifically by institutions, only by potentially by the application they might use, I would say.
Yeah. So we're not aware if libraries are using it. We'd be interested to find out, though. So contact us if you are.
Great. Well, since there's no questions in the box, I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a question, which kind of maybe relates to this question about usage. So I'm quite interested in your use of Wikidata for some of your work, and as a, I don't know, I always feel like I'm in a complicated relationship with Wikidata, but given that the data model in, nomenclature, really highly structured system, and then Wikidata, maybe not that. So can you talk a little bit about maybe your choices or sort of thoughts about Wikidata, maybe more generally in this sort of space of vocabularies and terminology management in linked data?
It works in English. However, sometimes the French terms can be very different. It's not perfect because, as you mentioned, we have a very structured hierarchical system. Wikidata, it's a bit of a free-for-all. And we don't, other than having volunteers doing the matching, somebody else could go after and change what we've done. So, and we cannot control that. right? So that's one of the risks of using Wikidata. Trang, do you want to add something?
I haven't done much matching myself. I'm just starting. Starting to use the mix and match tool, but having to find an exact match and then because like Nathalie mentioned, it's very hierarchical, and sometimes the placement of the Wikidata concept entity is not matched with the hierarchy that we have, so it might create some contested kind of matching as well. So I would say that is difficult. And I think we add the match. But for personally, in my point of view, I would use that as a platform to go out and find other matches in other vocabularies as well. That I would personally, if I would use it, I would say so. Because there's Library of Congress and any other control vocabularies could be added to that as external identifiers for the Wikidata entity. And then by matching to the same Wikidata, we can kind of use it as a pathway to get to the other external resources.
Thank you so much. We have a question in the chat for you as well too. They said that they think that Tran mentioned about having a look at actual software setup systems between the software and nomenclature set up in using a Western perspective, that you can use alternative terms for what you have. Have you considered an ILS software like Mercuto that is based on relational models?
I think I haven't heard of that software myself, so it might be interesting to look into it.
Yeah, I've heard of Mercuto. We haven't. When we did the RFP for our software, it was not available yet, I believe. One of our challenges is that often the software they have to be bilingual for the employees working because we work for the government of Canada. So sometimes that can be an issue, but we haven't explored Mercuto much, but we might decide to change. And I'm sure not. Maybe I shouldn't say it at all, but definitely I've heard about it, and I think it's open source if I'm not mistaken. So it might be one we could consider.
Yeah, it's like a content management system that you can adapt, but it is open source software, so we're open to that. And I think that kind of related to a question that I had about languages. So I noticed that you've been working with the Inuktitut language committee. And I guess my question for you, and I think that many people in the audience may want to know, is if there's other language committees from other First Nations or even the Métis language committee for that, would you be open to relationships with them and working with them on this?
Right now, we're just working with the government of Nunavut because they contacted us, but we would be more than happy to work with other communities, other language specialists or elders to add more Indigenous language in nomenclature. Absolutely. And I can add that right now, we've just worked with the government of Nunavut, but we know there's other Inuktitut speakers outside of the government of Nunavut, like in Nunavik, for example. And we would like to start a committee of Inuktitut speakers so that and different specialists of the language from around Inuit Nunangat, so that they can decide which which term would be the preferred term, and if there's other different alternative terms, we wouldn't have them do the decisions. But absolutely, we're open. We'd be more than happy to work with everybody.
That's great. And I really want to say again, thank you for doing, merci for doing this presentation and for explaining a little bit more about that. And I think that's part of the work that we are looking at as well too, how to incorporate Indigenous languages, because there isn't necessarily always the correct way. Even looking at French, Quebecois French and Parisian French. I mean, there's not always one that's the standard. So I think there's always going to be that relationships that you have to work on. I want to say again, thank you so much for being here today, and we look forward to continuing our relationship with you, coming from respectful terminology.
Thank you.
And I would like to.
Thank you so much for having us.
Maybe somebody can mute, and we'd like to end this webinar with some words from former Senator Maurice Sinclair. And I think it's really important that we end with this, because it really speaks to the work that we're trying to do with respectful terminology. And so this is actually from his book, Who We Are. And it's that we know that making things better will not happen overnight. It will take generations. That's how the damage was created, and that's how the damage will be fixed. Sinclair wrote, and if we agree on the object of reconciliation, and we agree to work together, the work that we do today will immeasurably strengthen the social fabric of Canada tomorrow. And that was really from the Canada Press article that was written today in honor of his passing from CTV Winnipeg. So I just want to make sure I have that citation, and I'll just put that in there. But I think it's really important words that all of us need to be aware of, that this work takes time, and that we are walking really on that path to reconciliation, and it's going to take us all working together to be able to get out of it. And so just trying to do the best that we can, and to be able to work towards this every day is very important. So I do want to say thank you so much. And I think today has been a good way to honor the work of the TRC chair and the former senator, in the way that we all work together. And I'll just let Stacey also give her thanks, and thanks to our sponsors and those who made this possible.
Well, thank you, Camille, as always, and thank you to our speakers. And I'm just trying to when is our next, just saying that we have 2 more sessions coming up on this series. I hope you will join us for our next sessions, and that the session was recorded, and we will be sending out a link to YouTube when we have posted recordings. But thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.